will eliminate completely the overtopping of River Road at that location. Infiltration measures at this site are prohibited based on the fact that it's in a wellhead protection area. So, and the use of basins is effectively prohibited by the topography and the land use and the right-of-way constraints. The project has received permitting approvals from IDEM for 401 and Army Corps for 404, and 800 linear feet of stream will be relocated on site, and about 160 feet will be mitigated under the in-lieu fee program. IDEM has reviewed it with regard to stormwater, erosion control, and allowed the project to proceed to construction. And the temporary erosion control scheme is the subject of some further coordination with Doug Wolf and IDEM. The county's drainage consultant has recommended construction approval, and we request the board consider this project for approval and welcome any questions or comments regarding it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else to add, Zach?
No, but I do want to highlight just a couple things. I do think this is a much needed project, and as far as public safety, I think it's going to improve our public roadways. Just to highlight a couple things, the outlet is the same to the unnamed tributary to Burnett's Creek, and I specifically want to highlight the reduction in velocities for erosion control. So I think this project, based off of the drainage calculations, will accomplish that goal of reducing erosion. Also, as far as public safety, the reduction in the road overtopping, I think, is another thing that this project brings to the table that I wanted to highlight. So we have no conditions on this, as was stated, so I'm happy to answer any other questions, but we do recommend construction approval as presented.
All right. Any questions from the board? Is there any public comment in regard to this project?
Mr. President, I would move for approval of the County Road 500 North River Road intersection improvements as outlined, and be construction approval as outlined in the Burke memo dated August 26, 2020.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes. All right. Thank you, Mike. All right. Other business. Looks like we have a bond.
Yes, one bond, Harrison High School driveway and parking addition. It's maintenance bond number B as in boy 32533021 in the amount of $26,783.50 from the Cincinnati Insurance Company, submitted by F&K Construction. I would recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes. All right. Anything else, Zach?
Just real quickly, we are moving forward with the directional bore under 450 north of Buck Creek for the Huffman-Weimert project. So that's entering the second phase of that project. So it's moving along slowly but surely. No further comment.
Okay. Is there any public comment? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So we are adjourned for the Drainage Board meeting, and we will start the obstruction hearing in just a couple minutes. public hearing to order. Um, If, I'll turn it over to Zach at this point to give a little bit of background.
Very well. Hang tight just a minute here. For some reason, my PDFs are not loading.
Would it be helpful if I just went over the broad view of how the
Rules?
statute works while you're doing
Sure.
that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so a petition's been filed under IC 36-9-27.4 for the removal of an obstruction in a mutual drain or natural surface water course. The surveyor has investigated, which is what the statute requires. Today's hearing, you've got to determine a few things. The initial thing is to determine whether a drain or natural surface waterway was obstructed, determine whether removing an obstruction will improve drainage for the petitioner without unreasonably damaging the land of the respondent. And if your answer is yes to both, then you're directed to fine for the petitioner. And after that, then you're directed to determine whether the obstruction was intentional or not. If it's intentional, then the respondent would pay for removal. If it's unintentional, the costs are allocated in a variety of ways that I can elaborate on if that becomes of interest. And just mutual drain is defined the same way it is in the drainage code. Natural surface water course is specifically defined in this statute as meaning an area of the surface of the ground over which water from falling rain or melting snow occasionally and temporarily flows in a definable direction and channel. So that's part of what you're looking at. So I think the way to proceed is to have the surveyor give his information about his investigation and findings, let the petitioner then present their case, and then let the respondent present theirs, and then if you have any follow-up, you can do that.
Doug, can you repeat the two questions in the first?
Yeah, so the first part is you're looking to see if has a drain or natural surface waterway been obstructed? So you got to figure out whether this is a drain or natural surface waterway, and if there's an obstruction. And if it has been obstructed, will removing the obstruction improve drainage for the petitioner without unreasonably damaging the land of the respondent?
Thank you. Okay. Zach?
Very well. Thank you, Doug. So, as was stated, Zach Beasley, Tippecanoe County Surveyor, my office received a petition for removal of obstruction from Todd and Jill Adams, located at 6330 County Road 100 North, just east of Wexford Drive in the Creekside subdivision, and immediately south of County Road 100 North. So I have an aerial on the screen. Just that we're zoomed in here. The nearest intersection is 100 North and 65 or 675 East. If you're heading out 26 East, going to the interstate, go to 550 East, take a left, head north on 550, head north until the road turns to the right. That becomes County Road 100 North. Go across the Wildcat, and you'll be in this location here. As you can see, the road to the south of 100 that I'm kind of highlighting with the red pointer, that is Wexford Drive. Mr. Adams, or the Adams family lives here, immediately south, as I indicated. The yellow line under the road is the culvert layer from the County Highway Department. So this is the culvert in question that I'm circling basically with the red pointer. The property owner to the north is William Jr. and Joyce Gillenbeck, which is highlighted in the red polygon, which is the parcel, overall parcel. So we'll move into the findings. That's the location of where we are in the county. I'll move on to the documents. These are email correspondence. I will say there is a long history on this particular culvert. I believe it started in the county highway office. I do believe they are here today to answer any questions. This was the initial email I believe I received from Mr. Adams, and we'll move forward. Mr. Adams supplied some photographs, and we have others of many, but these are pretty good, so I'll just hang with these. This is a photo looking along the south side of 100, looking east, and Mr. Adams' house would be just to the right of where this water is ponding. So we're looking east, immediately south of 100. The county road here where the car is traveling, that's County Road 100. The culvert's there in the lower left-hand corner of the photo, and you can see the water backed up here. Some landscaping up here to the right. So Wexford Drive would be down here at the bottom of this photo. Keep moving on here. There's 100 North. Looking east again, to the right, the house, I believe that's Mr. Adams' house. Wexford Drive is here. The culvert, as you can see visually in the photo, the culvert in question is here to the left, and this would be the north side of County Road 100 North, and you can see some brick or stone that's been placed around the culvert at this point in time, and some dirt that's built up. We'll get into that in just a little bit later. Here is a photo taken, I believe, by Mr. Adams. It was supplied to my office. Basically what he's showing here is he's got a box tape and a hand level or construction level. He's showing that he's measuring approximately 13¼ inches from the invert of the pipe up. I have field notes we'll get to here momentarily, but basically shows that my staff, I had my staff go out and take elevations of the site also, and basically we were right at 1 foot of obstruction between the invert of the tile and the top of the berm or stone or debris or dirt, whatever you want to call it. So there's basically a 1 foot high spot in front of the invert of the culvert. Back up here. This is the location again of the culvert in question. So we already went through that. Keep moving. I think that's pretty much it. There's the field notes that my staff took. There's some contours and other things. Just as far as history is concerned, this structure was, I've spoken with the County Highway Department. They provide me their information on this. I also went back and looked at the Creekside file from when it was went through the Drainage Board. This structure in question on the utility coordination actually plan for Creekside, it shows this culvert and a existing. So before this structure was there was an existing 4 foot wide box structure to be removed and replaced with a 22-inch by 34-inch elliptical RCP culvert to extend under acceleration taper into proposed drainage swell, grade and drainage plan. So just some history on that. But as far as at this moment in time and what was presented to me, as I mentioned before quickly, a petition of obstruction was filed with my office. We investigated it. We basically found there to be a foot obstruction in front of the invert of the downstream side of the culvert. So that is the short version of the story. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Zach? If not, we'd like to hear from the petitioner. And again, if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. Todd Adams, 903 Wexford Drive, Lafayette. I am the petitioner. I had just a couple of comments I wanted to make. First of all, I do appreciate the help of the surveyor's office and listening to the input on this and conducting the investigation, as well as the board taking the time to hear this today. Bill, I do regret having to be here today. Doesn't feel very neighborly for sure, but you know, we've talked about this a few times and feel like we've exhausted all avenues to resolve this privately, so felt like this was the only means that I had to pursue relief on this. I'll be brief here, just a couple of comments. I have been at 903 Wexford since purchasing the property in June of 2015. The description of the obstruction that you just heard has been in place my entire time there, and I suspect for some time before. Just a little further description on the issue. You saw pictures of the ponding that occurs there in moderate to heavier rains. I'd estimate that we get that kind of a ponding situation probably 6 to 12 times a year. Of course, depending on the amount of rain and the frequency of the rain and how quickly it can absorb into the ground. Typically what happens is once the rain stops, the ponded water will usually absorb into the ground after a couple of days. But with the heavier rains, again, not anything like a deluge, but I'll call it a heavier persistent rain in the 2 to 4 times per year time frame, that water will rise high enough. Then in addition to the ponding, it will flow all the way across the front of our yard. You saw that landscape berm there. It'll wash the mulch out and concern of exposing the roots on those plants and doing other damage there, but it does a lot of, wreaks a lot of havoc with the mulch and the landscaping there and that welcome sign there in the yard. And in spring of 2019, the grounds got so saturated, we had a pretty wet spring, if you'll recall, that the ponding lasted for several days, basically killing the majority of the grass in the area under that ponding that you saw in the picture, which was really the point in time where I told Bill that, hey, we got to do something about this. I tried to live with it for a few years, but got to the point where we did some real damage, and it's still not fully recovered from that spring of the year before. I'll wrap up here. Like I said, I did a little investigating early on after moving in when I saw the ponding and quickly discovered that the flow was being obstructed by what looked like, somebody put landscaping blocks there. Another little tidbit information that, kind of formed the basis for me using the petition after we were unable to resolve it privately was Bill and I did have a private contractor come out and look at some options to potentially resolve it, see if we could correct it, and in process of measuring it, he showed us that the culvert does fall 4 inches roughly from my property to his, so that kind of confirmed for me that, that was the design intent, of course, that the water was supposed to go that way, and then take advantage of a natural water course from the exit onward. So, in my assessment, I feel like we've met the definition of obstruction of a mutual drain or natural surface water course per the Indiana Code, and would ask for the board's assistance in having that removed. Thank you.
Any questions from Mr. Adams? Okay, thank you. Mr. Gallen, back to you.
Yeah, my name's Bill Gellenbeck, and I live at 6330 East, 100 North. My wife and I bought that property in '88, and in '88 that culvert was there. And what happened was the water would run across, and then it just pretty much dispersed into my field, go down my driveway, and it's always been that way. So when I heard that they was going to develop that property, I assumed that maybe they would fix that drainage on that side, because they put in storm sewers and they had heavy equipment over there. And then I heard that they was going to put a culvert across the road. And I've got an old Transit, and I shot that, and my grade was 14 inches higher than their side. So I actually called the county drainage board, and the guy's name was Bob Evans at the time, and he actually gave me to the, I guess, Indiana Drainage Board or Highway Drainage Board. And I talked to somebody there, and they gave me the engineer to that project over there, and I talked to him and explained that my side was 14 inches higher, and how was that going to drain? And I pretty much got nowhere, so I went back to the drainage board, and I talked to him there, and I said, it's not going to drain. My side is higher than your side. And he told me, he said, they know what they're doing. And I said, okay. So that was the end of that. So then eventually when they put it in, I had a 14-inch drop on my side, approximately. It could have been 12, but one time I was mowing up there, and I have a big rider, and it actually caved in on me. So that's where and I actually put those landscape stones in there to shore that up so that it wouldn't cave in anymore. So that's where we're at on that. So it's too bad it wasn't resolved back when they built the subdivision. So, I mean, I hate it. It does back up. For me, it don't seem to back up that much, but Todd would know more about that than I do because it does back up on his property. But for that, to be able to get that to drain, you're going to have to dig a couple 100 feet into my property to get that thing to drain. Because, I mean, if you would look at Google Maps, that has looked the same for a very, very, very long time. It's not like I filled anything in, I moved anything in there. The only thing I've ever done up there is I had some Christmas trees up there, and they died out, and I dug them out, and that was it. So.
Questions?
So, and maybe Highway can answer this. There is no natural ditch
No,
on
there
either
is
side
no
of the road?
natural, no, none whatsoever. I mean, if you look at the Google, you can see that it's pretty high right at that point and just slopes down into my property.
So if you go back to the one picture, Zach, where's the overview picture?
This
There.
one?
Right. So theoretically, and I'm just trying to think, where it ends there, does that water then shoot straight to the west to that person's house somewhat?
See, that's actually my property. The water comes across the road, it disperses out into that grassy field,
Okay.
and then it disperses to the west and north and goes to the woods. There's kind of a swampy area.
So it is kind of flowing away from that house, but aiming towards that like pond kind of sitting behind, I guess,
Yes,
is what I'm saying.
that's the way the water eventually ends up, is down into that swampy area.
There is no Mother Nature natural kind of swell.
There is no natural
aiming-
swell, there is
kinda
nothing there.
aiming to that direction.
No.
So that would be a natural waterway, or what?
Yeah, well, so let me jump in here real quick and point a couple things out for clarity, and to elaborate what Bill's talking about. I don't disagree with what he said, but I want to add some things to it. So let's start on the south side of the road, and so here's the laser pointer down here in Creekside. Bill, one of the things that you said, and I'm not questioning any of the conversations that you had, I'm just adding to what the
Right.
story you told, okay? What it looks like to me is going on is that Creekside, they did what they were supposed to do as far as following the ordinance and dealing with the additional stormwater runoff created by them, so on and so forth. However, one of the things, and you've lived out there for years, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a relatively steep grade going to the east here, up 100 north to the east, and so there's a pretty good sized roadside ditch on the south, and so there's water that's coming from in this general area. There's a break up in here somewhere, because there's another culvert over here, but there's water that's coming down that roadside ditch, and the reason why I point that out, and I'm trying to be very surgical in what I'm talking about here, I'm thinking that more than likely, and I didn't go into a great amount of research on this, but what I'm thinking probably is going on is that the water that was created by Creekside, they did deal with that. But there's off-site water coming through this roadside ditch that's getting to this culvert that's always got to that culvert. And so they put it in there. Now, getting back to what you're talking about as far as it doesn't really go anywhere, I don't dispute that either. What looks like to me has probably been the case is that there has historically been somewhat of a low area or depressional area, and that's what I'm kind of circling with my red pointer here. Generally, it's just a low-lying area. So at some point in time, it's very plausible that the county highway department, decades ago, put a culvert in there as an equalizer pipe, just so the water could balance out on both sides of the road. And then once it gets high enough, it will break out eventually, either this direction to the northwest across you and your neighbor to get to the Wildcat, or it could possibly go down this direction too, if it gets through Wexford and then around this house here and then on down to the Wildcat this direction to the west on the south side. So there's a couple different routes there, but I just for clarity purposes, I'm thinking that some of the water, or most of the water that's coming to that culvert is probably from the roadside ditch, the majority of it. I'm not saying 100%, but the majority of it. And then, yes, he's right, there is no, and to add to Commissioner Byers' question, there is no clear, defined surface path going from this general area to the Wildcat now.
When they actually got done with the subdivision and they got the drain put in, they had trouble with the drainage and the water was backing up on their side and it was actually running out in the streets. And Doug Menon was the person that developed that. And he actually said that they wouldn't let him sell any more lots until he corrected that. So he actually bought truckloads of dirt in and filled in Todd's yard and banked that up so that the water had to come my way. He forced the water my way to get it to go because it was actually low enough that I was getting no water. All of it was running out on their side. So by banking it up on their side, then they got it to come my way. But then it pooled a lot on their side.
And with the highway there, there's no space or room, because I mean, we have right of way so many feet from each side of the road.
Right, 22, I do believe.
That could run a ditch.
It could run in the ditch, yes, correct.
Could extend a ditch towards the creek or whatever.
Yes.
They're saying no, both of them are shaking their heads no, so that you don't think there's enough room to cut a ditch to probably get in through there.
I'm not even sure if there's not enough room on the south side of the road, because there's probably a ditch down close to the creek. There may be a ditch down that way anyway, but there at Creekside, there is no ditch.
You're saying not enough room on the south side either then? I'm looking at them back here.
Ray, just let the record show, in case it comes up, that members of the highway department are shaking their heads no.
And but the actual culvert is in the road right away. Okay. And Zach, you mentioned that culvert was there to equalize the water, so in other words, it was flowing in both directions.
No, I'm saying it could be.
It could be.
I would let the highway department speak to that, but what I can tell you is that according to my office's field work, the structure as it exists in the field today has 1/10 of a foot of fall from the south side to the north side.
Okay, so it is.
Yeah, so when they installed it, that would lead me to believe they felt that, whoever installed it felt that it was supposed to flow from south to north.
Okay, and then, did your field staff find that the ground was pretty level on both sides? Or is there the 12 to 14 inches that Mr. Gillenback had mentioned?
Well, let's see. I don't remember seeing that in my field notes, no, but that could very well, we didn't go, let's see, there's 50 foot plus or minus to the north of that was 95.2. 95.2, let me take a look at this. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think we went much further than the actual culvert itself in our taking ground elevations. But I do have an elevation that they did take one 50 foot north of where the brick and the block and things were shown right there at the end of the culvert, and it was we assumed 100, but it was 95.22. I was trying to find see if we did the same thing on the south. My guess is they didn't, because that wasn't my instructions. But what I can tell you, though, I do have. Let's look at it this way. This may be an easier way to do it. I can tell you it's fairly flat out there, Tom. I mean, generally speaking. Let me pull up the contours here real quick. I have some other imagery down here. There we go, right there. Let's zoom into this. This may be a little more helpful. I'm not going to sit here and debate whether there's 14 inches or not, or 12 inches, or 1 foot, or whatever the case may be, without a very finite level of survey work. That's getting into some very high accuracy. But what I can tell you is that generally speaking, there is a low area on both sides, or was on both sides of the road. Here's the contours, as you can see. And then actually, let's see, yeah, here we go. So, here's my pointer. Here's basically the 570 contour, so 570 feet above sea level is where we are here, and you can see it comes across the road and on the other side of the road here. So it's, generally speaking, it's fairly flat in this area. So if he took, what I'm trying to say is that it's generally flat, and if Mr. Gellenbach took an elevation at some point in time in history and found a spot that was 14 inches lower, I'm not going to argue with that. He may very well. I mean, we're shooting dirt and shooting the ground. There could have been a small depressional area that he took a shot in. You know, that's within the range of accuracy that you might be able to see. But generally speaking, instead of looking at a specific point here and one shot that was taken at some point in time years ago, I'm looking at kind of generally the whole area. And keep in mind, these contours, I'm not entirely sure. Here on the south side, he was talking about fill had been brought in there. I don't know if that's necessarily representative of accurately where the house sits, but it certainly should be up here along the road and here. But what I'm trying to say is that it's generally flat, and if he feels like he took a shot somewhere, I'm not going to argue about that. That very well could be, but generally speaking, it's a flat area, depressional.
But also looking at your numbers sitting there, Zach, you're going from a 570 off to the northwest to a 568. So like you're saying, it's not much slopage at all.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But what I'm sitting here looking at is along the road, you're going from a 570 down to a 560, which
So,
does get you the slope.
Yeah, so yes, Dave, thank you. Let me show you guys one other thing. So, I never know how much you want to know and how much you don't want to know on some of this stuff. I could bore you with details all day, but the bottom line is, here's the surface hydrology overlaid on the contour information, and this. So, just for the recording and for the public and everyone watching, for clarity here, the blue solid lines with the numbers on them are the contours, the surface contours, and they're overlaid onto the parcel layer, and also that there's dashed blue lines that represent the surface hydrology layer. And basically all that means is that when the rain falls, it should, if it's depicted accurately, and sometimes that can be brought into question, but the water would pool up and then run when it got deep enough along those dashed lines. And so getting back to where we are, we're over here, again, on the right, or the south, or the bottom right quadrant of this imagery, or this photo, this picture. Here's the culvert in question. You can see the contours again. We got the 570. The hydrology layer, and I don't know how accurately this is depicted, but from what I'm seeing, the numbers that we took, what both of the residents have spoke to, it, in my opinion, depicts the kind of the depressional area that I'm talking about. And so the equalizing that could potentially happen, then when it fills up enough, the bowl fills up enough, it could break out and go this direction, as you can see this going, and then on around and up and down to the Wildcat, kind of squirrels around there. And then on the south side, here it's showing that can break out through here and then run along the back of this residence onto the west and then down to the Wildcat Creek. And so it has a couple different paths. So all I'm really trying to say is that, generally speaking, it's a low area, that there's a culvert and a county road that goes through it. There's been a development placed in there at some point in time in history. Water equalizes back and forth, and when it gets high enough, it can break out and go different directions. And there is, yes, no clear defined surface pattern. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, I'm just thinking, yes, I think we can say there's an obstruction there. I'll say that. But I think by curing one person's problem, we're creating another person's problem. It's the easiest way I'm looking at it. And I'm just trying to figure out, is there some way we can attempt to cure both problems? The way I'm kind of looking at it. And that's why I keep looking at Stu and Mike. I mean, and I know we don't want to spend money, blah, 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 and all that stuff, you know, where a filled tile or something could run along the road with a catch basin sitting right there and shoot that 10 feet down on the edge of the road or not. But I know, once again, we're playing with the roadway and stuff. So I'm just, I think we can cure your problem I think you now have a heck of a problem. So, and that's
Yes.
kind of what I'm sitting here looking at.
I get a lot of water anyway. I have like a ditch that runs about halfway through my property, and that thing sends a lot of water down through it. So I do get a lot of water.
So I'm just curious, but I don't know how the other two feel, so.
Well, if I'm looking at the hydrology, your map there, it does, like you mentioned, most of the subdivision itself stays on the north side of the road, or I'm sorry, on the south side of the road.
Yes.
And it does look like it's the water that's coming from the east down the slope that's going through this culvert. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So, I mean, it seems like that's the natural waterway. Meaning, even though there's no, clear path, the water would naturally run through that field to get to the creek eventually, wouldn't it?
On the south side?
I'm sorry, now I'm back on the north side.
You're back on the
after
north
it
side.
crosses the culvert.
Yeah, under the culvert here, yes. Generally speaking, what would happen is that, water would come down this low area, it would run through the culvert, it would pool up more than likely on both sides of the road until it got high enough to break out and come this direction or the other direction, this way, to the west. So yes,
what I'm
there's
saying.
two flow paths that it could potentially go to.
Almost like the culvert should have gone under Wexford and kept going that direction. Basically what it looks like versus
If
cross.
there's a natural flow pattern on that south side, why wouldn't they have followed it instead of crossing the road?
Well, I don't think it's very defined either, but
And I'm sorry, did you say the culvert was put in when the subdivision was put in? Or
There was an old culvert there. It had been there for a very, very long time. And a new culvert was put in when the subdivision was put
in the
in.
exact same place or very close to?
Exact same place, pretty much.
And a larger culvert, I think, than you had numbers earlier.
no, I think it was actually,
Was it smaller?
I thought it was a little smaller.
The other one could have been flatter and wider, where this one's more an oval shape.
The existing, the structure that was there before the current structure was a 4-foot wide box structure. And then it was replaced with a 22-inch by 34-inch elliptical, or that's what was supposed to go in there. So according to the plans.
And that 1 foot height you're showing from the top of the bricks down to the bottom of the culvert, is that basically just a little hill? So if that whole hill was theoretically cut out, that's going to allow,
Unfortunately, that's where you have to. The hill just kind of gradually slopes out. So you would probably have to dig between 100 and 200 feet into my property to slope that out. Put a swell in there. But you think if it was a natural flow, there would already be a swell there.
If it's, you water experts, if with the ground that level, would there be a natural swell or is it more just over the top? Because I would assume a swell is generated by the water at a higher speed, which means you've got more of a slope to it.
You're saying if there was a defined surface channel?
Yeah.
Typically, yes, that would be the case, but in this particular situation, that's not visual, it's not visible anyway.
And that's because it's so flat.
That, in my opinion, yeah, and the solutions that were being tossed around, we've, at least internally, we discussed, and there's not a easy button to push on this one, necessarily. I don't know what, future plans there are for the area and so on and so forth, but,
Mr. Adams, did you have something else to add?
Actually, just a question
Actually,
or clarification.
could you step
Yeah,
up to the
sure.
microphone? I'm sorry.
The culvert, Mr. Beasley, you mentioned something about an equalizer. I'm not an expert on drainage, but like I said, I think I understand that there is 4-inch fall from one end to the other, maybe a 1/4 inch per foot. Doesn't that imply that it's intended as a drain? as opposed to an equalizer?
Well, I'm not gonna speak to the design of the county road. I'm just telling you what my findings are in the field.
Okay. Logically, I would think an equalizer. Could somebody answer that question? Is the fact that there's fall there, does that not imply that that is intended to flow and not just be as an equalizer circuit? Or is that not a valid assumption?
That would seem to make sense to me, that it was designed to flow from south to north.
And if that's the design intent, then it seems almost ludicrous to me that the design intent would have been to have a pipe that drains and then not 20 inches outside the mouth of that pipe, there's nowhere for the water to go. So something's not adding up for me in terms of how we got here, I guess.
Does Highway have anything to add in regard to this?
My experience with the highway department, I didn't work for the highway department when this subdivision was built. And I think it was, what year was it built, Zach? We were,
The date on the
Early
plans,
2000?
Yeah, 01, 02 vintage, very early 2000s.
okay.
Hey, Mike, could you get a little closer to the microphone?
Yeah. So I don't know the review of the plans, the design of the plans. I mean, I'm not aware of any of that. I do have to agree with Mr. Adams about the slope of the pipe. Usually if it's an equalizer pipe, to put it in flat. But if there's a little slope on it, that does kind of indicate that maybe there would be flow to the north. And we're all just guessing about what, 2004 or 2003 to when did you build?
We didn't build it, we're the third owners, I've been there since 2015.
Okay. Who knows what's going on in 15 years worth of time, so. But I do know, just driving by, I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at this, but I know driving by, it seems to me that to put a tile on the north side of the road, there is a slight hill there, so you would have to go deeper in front of that residence there to do something on that north side. As far as laying a pipe, I don't think there's room to do a open channel or a side ditch, Dave. It'd be too deep.
I'm just
Yeah.
throwing spitballs on the wall and see if one sticks or whatever.
Yep, and I can only guess that since the flow to that old 4-foot by 4-foot box culvert was reduced, and the radiuses that were required for the subdivision entrance, that old box couldn't be extended, so a new structure had to be installed to go from one side of the road to the other with the new radiuses that were put in to just so it would fit. But I think that's the reason for the culvert being installed and the reason for the reduced size, because they've taken water away with the subdivision drainage plan that used to flow to the north.
Mike, what did you just said something about adding a pipe?
But doing away with the box culvert and adding the elliptical structure that's there. I don't think it's adding to it. We didn't add another structure.
Pipe along the road.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
To
talking about.
drain down the road, no, there's not enough, there's actually a slight rise, there's not enough room for an open ditch in the right of way, you'd have to pipe it. So we'd have to put in a storm sewer. It's just, I think naturally, you have a little storage depression area up there just above the bottom of the really downturn to the valley. And it feels like, okay, we blocked the pipe, so we'll do more storage on this side than that side by blocking up the pipe. But there, and that's where you get into, this question, as far as there's no easy fix because of the rise as far as taking it straight along the roadway, within roadway right-of-way to the creek. It would be a serious investment of tax dollars to do that. And we can survey it and determine,
Yeah.
but you can tell right away, you drive out there and you look at the drives, there's no pipes, there's not enough room, it's going uphill, and we'd be fighting gravity all the way.
Basic 12-inch pipe running along the side is,
That's what we would,
that's what
basically have to
basically
do,
a field tile.
put in
Run along the
inlet.
side with a riser.
and run a pipe, I don't want to guess, it'd be pretty long.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It'd have to be,
Today,
it'd have
Once
to
we
be
get
surveyed.
past the 2 houses, basically, you're at 560, let it roll.
Those 2 driveways that you're seeing there on the north side.
Right.
Yeah, we'd have to get past those, and I think then we'd probably be low enough in the valley to let it go.
Right.
But that's probably.
I guess then again, are we creating another problem by putting water on somebody that didn't have that water before?
Yeah,
I mean,
we're
it's-
actually
there's all kinds
changing
of,
the course
yeah, so.
of the water,
We
which we
determine
don't
as
really
pipe
like to do.
level.
No, it's got a 1/10 of a foot of fall from the south side to the north side.
That's as far as we've pursued it.
So, I don't know, Zach, if you can answer this or not, but if the road and the culvert didn't exist, would the water coming down that hill naturally flow to the north and the west?
Well, if, you're saying if the road and the culvert wasn't there?
Yeah.
I believe that it would, yes, or at least, I don't know if I'd use the word flow, I might use the word pool. Because like I said, there's no defined channel going anywhere. It's just coming down the hill from the east and then pooling until it would get high enough, the elevation of the water, the pool of the water would get high enough to where it would break out and go, somewhere. Which somewhere would be, as I've talked about before, to the north, according to the surface hydrology and the contours, would be to the northwest, as I showed earlier, and then to the west, as I showed earlier, to the Wildcat. So
when the culvert was originally put in, before Creekside or whatever, it was directing the water the way it wanted to go anyway.
I don't know. I mean, the assumption would be yes, but I don't know that. I don't know the entire history of all that. So, but my assumption would be that, but that's the best I can offer there.
So, Mr. Gillenbeck, prior to it being filled in there on your side, did water actually pool on your property, or did it flow across your property?
It flowed across. When the old culvert was in there, the other side was high enough, it had built up. There was pretty much a natural flow going through there. When they put the new culvert in, they dug out on the south side, so it would be down to the bottom of that drain on that side, which in turn made it build up. The old one flowed naturally. It did not build up on the other side.
So with the new culvert, though, it did pool on your side?
No, on the south side. I'm on the north side. It would pool on the south side, get up high enough, and then run off on my side. So since I'm 14 inches higher, you've got 14 inches of water on that side before it even starts coming across on my side.
So if it was never pooling on your side, why did you put that in there?
Because when I mow around it, it was dangerous. It would cave in. And matter of fact, it did cave in, and I fell in that hole, that 14-inch hole with my mower. So somehow I had to stabilize that so that it would not cave in on me to mow it. So, which I've taken those out. They're out. So, but I mean, the water's still not going to go anywhere because there's still 14 inches of dirt there.
Why would that not be stable?
Don't know if I have an answer to that.
Would highway have an answer to that? Why would that ground not be stable?
Well, the thing is, if it gets wet and muddy, then you have a mower that weighs 600-700 pounds, and you loop around it, mainly like a zero turn. It just cave in. It would just cave in on you into that.
Yes, Doug, you got any questions or answers?
questions or answers.
I have a question about the stabilization. Is there anything else, anybody got any ideas of anything else, flow aside that you could do to better stabilize that area where the outflow is?
Did it cave in, or was it just muddy?
It just kind of caved in. Well, I mean, it's a 14-inch drop, so, if I stood on the edge of that and went like that, it's going to just cave in on me without my retaining wall there.
14-inch
Yeah.
drop, okay.
Yeah, there's a 14, it's this deep,
Okay, from the top of the culvert,
from the top of the ground to the bottom of the culvert. So it's 14 inches right there. So I have a big opening in my property that's as wide as that culvert, and it's 14 inches deep. And then it comes out like a half moon into my property.
isn't that the same setup as on the south side?
Oh, no, the south side's got a great big ditch that runs down the ditch.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all open on the south side. That's because our side is 14 inches higher.
Oh, there it is.
So you can see how that has filled up with silt on the inside because the water just builds up in there. And right there where my retaining stones are, that was a 14-inch drop right there.
We know what direction that level's pointing?
This is the north.
It's north and south. It's pointing north and south. The culvert's on the north side.
Northwest, southeast.
Yeah.
So the road is right here?
The,
Right here.
Southeast, the bottom part of the screen?
Yes.
one of the things I do want to point out here real quick is that, the 14 inches that you're talking about, I guess I buy that from the standpoint up there roughly where the,
Yes, right there.
yeah, right here, where, if you were to take a shot generally in this area, a ground elevation shot, and then down in the hole, where this tape is being measured, I would agree, roughly, a foot to 14 inches. But I guess one of the things that I guess I want to clarify is that the ground shot that we took 50 foot to the north is actually lower
Okay.
than the invert of the tile, which means the water would flow across there. It was 95.22. So I don't dispute that that's the difference that you're seeing, but what I'm trying to point out is that it appears that there is a berm around there, that this is a high spot that's got, a foot berm around the invert of the culvert, because the culvert is, say, at here, a foot higher is the berm that goes around it, and then you go 50 foot out onto your property, and it's basically 4/10 lower, the ground elevation is 4/10 lower than the invert of the tile.
Okay. So it's not just higher right there at the discharge, it's higher 50 feet out.
No, it's lower 50 feet out.
It's okay, then it's the same height 50 feet out, or it's higher than your culvert.
It's lower than the culvert, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so at 49 feet, is it higher?
Well, I don't know, we didn't take a shot at 49 feet.
Okay,
I'm
so,
just-
well, I mean, because it slopes up, it actually
Yeah.
slopes up toward that culvert.
Okay, according to the data we shot, that's not what it shows.
Unfortunately, I mean, any difference in that height, and it's not going to drain. I mean,
I don't get how this was supposed to be, this isn't how it was supposed to be designed. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with these photos.
So,
And I guess just because you gotta,
Looks like a
Hey,
koi
Tom?
pond.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
just like sort of identify what these pictures are that you're looking at?
so these are pictures taken by the
I
highway
agree.
department.
I agree 100%.
And we have pictures of both the south side of the culvert and the north side of the culvert. These are, and it looks like, I don't know how this was supposed to be designed, meaning the north side.
No, nor do I. I mean, I don't have that information right in front of me, but I can tell you that historically, and the highway department may be able to speak to this, but sometimes they put culverts in sump conditions, below the natural grade for whatever,
And that would be the
reasons.
case here, Stu? That this was,
My understanding is this culvert,
I want to go to the microphone.
actually, to be upfront, I believe the subdivision installed the culvert,
Yeah, that's right.
but Barry's been following the history of this thing.
Barry Sullivan, Tippecanoe County Highway Department. When they built this subdivision, if I recall, the 4-foot structure that was in place, the existing ones had been there for, we don't know how long, it was an old structure. When they developed that, they had some of the waters going naturally across 100 from south to north. And Vesters, the design engineer, they had to handle that situation because due to the culvert was in poor shape, so they designed it with the new structure, which was smaller than the existing. When I went out there and investigated this initially in 2016, it appeared like the landscaping block was put in place and some backfilling behind the block had taken place. I can't verify that. I don't know how long it had been in place when I was called out for the complaint. But my assumption, it looked like the landscaping block was placed at the end of the end section, and then some backfilling was done. I couldn't tell how far out, how much was done. But the end of the end section is right at the highway right-of-way, so that's beyond highway right-of-way.
So what, boy, I'm getting more confused the more we're here. On those pictures, what was the obstruction? Can somebody point that out to me, meaning what was added that wasn't?
Where you can see the brick.
Okay,
You can see a little bit of dirt.
So if I can grab one of those photos.
Their landscaping block.
Okay, so Barry, if you could come up here. And so this is how it was designed, but this had been filled in?
That's what it appears. I don't know if it was designed as a sump outlet of that structure. I didn't do the inspection. But just looking at it, it appears like, and it matches what Zach is saying, the elevation 50 foot out is 4/10 lower than the invert elevation. So it looked like these blocks were put in and this area here was filled in. Like when they, this swell, not really a swell, but like a sheet flowing out towards the northwest as you had indicated earlier.
Okay.
That is part, this is a tile structure, right?
This is the concrete in section for the culvert.
Okay.
These are landscaping blocks.
And there are two courses, two rows,
I think it goes deeper than that, but
so it's three.
it's hard to tell, yeah.
Okay, so these are the stones that we're seeing right here?
Yes.
Okay,
And this is the part of the in section you're seeing.
okay.
Well, obviously, even if the landscape block comes out, you've still got
Some
an
grading.
obstruction beyond that and grading to do.
That's what I'm saying. Just looking at it as a complaint basis, it looked like these were placed and some fill had been placed. I don't know how far out, how much, but something has been filled in.
I do have a question for, I don't know for who right now, but if those blocks, prior to the installation of the blocks and any berming that went on, did you still have pooling on both sides of
Yes,
heavy rain?
we did. Also, I never put any fill in there. I've never moved any dirt in there. That dirt was all there. I did put those landscape stones in there. Drain to nowhere. That's correct.
Need to talk to Burke Business or something. Anyway,
So even if those come out,
answer questions.
it likely isn't
Yeah,
going to change.
got
the
a couple of
situation.
thoughts, but.
I have moved those stones. Those stones are no longer in
They're
there.
gone.
So they're gone.
I don't want to muddy the water, but I
Too
have.
late, it's already muddy.
Yeah, I know. I've looked at this for possible solutions and beat it to death numerous times. And as I said earlier, I don't know if there's a great solution to be had, but one thing that I will throw out, and short of the, some road improvement project, which would be expensive, which we just discussed, and I won't go back and revisit that, but that has been talked about. I guess my question for both landowners that are here, and I realize that, that neither of the two that are present own the property, but is there any chance that, there is an old tile, or would there be interest in putting a new, tile across here and daylighting it into this pond somehow or another? If this landowner was favorable or
Well, if you look at that,
agreeable, or-
if you look at that woodsy area,
Yeah.
just to the east of that, right
Yeah,
there,
right in
that's
here.
my property, and that's all swamp.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the approach I'm trying to, I guess I'm asking, okay, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I am asking both parties here and before us is that, this is a private matter that happens to have a county road in the middle of it, but it's been brought to my office and turned to the Drainage Board as a petition of obstruction. I guess I'm asking both parties involved, is it possible for the two of you or anyone else in this area, private owners, to work together to put in a 12, 15-inch tile, whatever is necessary, from basically, well, we use my pointer again, from where we're talking about here on the north side of the tile, following generally my path here that I'm going into this area somewhere and daylighting it in here or to the pond. If those folks want a water source for the pond, that might help. I don't know. I'm making a proposal. I don't have a good solution for this, all right? I guess I'm just asking, have you guys talked about that?
We've talked about that, and the problem is with that is the cost. I just feel like I shouldn't have to pay for something that was messed up back in 2000. Should have been corrected then. And like I said, I even brought it up that it would not drain, and they put it in anyway.
Was it the intent for the culvert to be, it was the intent for the culvert to be level?
I don't know, but it's not level,
Okay.
the way it's put in, but I don't know what the intent was. I did not go back and research all of that.
And I may be trying to separate something that can't be separated, but Mr. Gallenbeck, a question for you. What do you find more troubling for you on the north side? Is it water running across your property, or is it ongoing erosion at the edge of where that culvert outlets?
I really have no erosion. I mean, as long as I stay away from that edge, it don't cave in. There's enough grass and stuff that has grown around there now that it don't erode that much. I get a lot of debris that when the water comes across, it brings weeds and corn stalks and cans and things out into my property. But my driveway, it used to run down my driveway. And I actually put some stone on it, kind of build it up a little so it don't puddle on my driveway now.
So then the question becomes, we can't necessarily, the landscape bricks have been removed, but that's not the total obstruction is what I'm hearing, that there may be a little bit of a rise on the other side. And how much of a rise are we talking?
Well,
For how many feet from the edge of where those brick or blocks were installed?
Well, and shouldn't Highway have a plan on how that culvert was supposed to be installed? Wouldn't we have that as part of the subdivision?
The construction plans that were approved. Barry, how much fall was in that, planned in that? Two sheets.
Well, wouldn't it also show how this was supposed to be, how this was supposed to look on the north side?
Yeah, there does show fall from the south to the north, and if I memorize something like 4/10 fall from the south to the north, so it would tend to make
I guess what I'm asking is, we know it didn't have those brick, but was it designed so that there was truly a slight slope or a grade difference?
Yeah, right here, Barry's right, it's right at 4/10 of fall.
So in other words, some of this dirt was not there. Is that what I'm hearing? on this edge of the drain?
I don't think they cut it out the way it was supposed to fall. They just put the culvert in.
That, yeah, either one could be true. I don't know, as we're saying here. These elevations that I just read off, it's actually 3,800s is what it is. But these elevations are I believe the design between elevation on the south side of the invert of the culvert to the north side of the invert of the culvert. So, yes, it's, rounded up, it's 4/10. Now, when it got installed, according to what we as-built, we're looking at right at 1/10 of a foot.
So couldn't, I mean, and this is all in road right away, right?
I can't speak to that.
Okay. I mean, couldn't our highway department go out and put this back to where it's supposed to be on the plans?
The outlet is on the right of way, right? Into the pipe. We don't have any ground.
This is on the end of the right of way.
When they did the subdivision, I don't know that it would have included anything on this gentleman's ground. They just went through the right of way, they got approval on the subdivision. Approval, put the pipe in and discharged it. It sounds like this has historically been a wet, swampy area forever, and it's always been a problem. As far as that ground
Actually,
around, you know, these things.
can you come up to the, we can't get it in the minutes, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just kibitzing now. Barry knows a lot more than Mike historically. But it sounds from what I'm hearing, you know, that it has historically been a low swampy area right there on the edge of the floodplain. And that was discharged to, this has been an ongoing, sounds like an ongoing problem long before either of these gentlemen were here in this area. Zach had mentioned a tile to the north to alleviate the swamping problems, because what's happening now is the ponding is just moving south across the road. You know, it's been blocked. It's ground will raise, you know, when you're in a swamp like that. We don't have the room or grades. We're going uphill, and it's like, so that is an option. We could put in a storm sewer to alleviate it. It feels like the easiest, cheapest solution is just to build the swale that they're talking about to cut down that storage area, that swampiness. But that's off, right? That's why we're here, because it's not really
I mean, it just
it's
seems
private
like
property.
this needs to be done exactly as the plans are. But if that's not in road right away, do we have the authority to do that as?
This long after, I don't know, I mean, probably not.
I think Zach said that the.
Can you,
I think Zach indicated that the as-built plans show that the fall is 1/10 as-built. So if we put it in per plan, to be even 3/10 deeper than what it is now. So I'm assuming that at the time that they put in the culvert, it's possible that it's at the 1/10 drop because of the contours on the north side, trying to match up more so and not be a recessed
and I guess I'm not
situation.
necessarily talking about the culvert itself. I was talking about whatever was supposed to be outside of the culvert. Whatever, however that design was supposed to be.
I don't know if I have that detail sheet or not. I didn't see it. I don't think it's in this file. And we, at that time during,
However this was supposed to be done, you know, whether there's supposed to be a, yeah. Wouldn't, wouldn't, when you put in a culvert though, don't they say, okay, the grade has to be a certain amount or a certain number of feet out at this level, that kind of thing, so that water flows from the culvert to somewhere else? Isn't that part of the?
Typically, yes. I don't know what they did at that time, and what I'm about to say is purely an educated guess. My guess is that when it went through the review process, I believe the size of the culvert there now is smaller than what was there. So it's entirely possible that water that had been coming there before was collected internally within Creekside. So they showed on their drainage submittal that they were reducing the amount of area, acreage, and discharge coming to the culvert, and so therefore they were making things better, if you will, from a volume of water getting to that location. They showed a smaller structure there, which, as I mentioned, would possibly, and as I said, this is purely an estimation on my part, the water coming from the roadside ditch. And so with all that collected, what Barry said, yeah, that's possible. They may have just tried to match existing on the other end of the culvert on the north side and just left it at that and replaced it and moved on. It's possible. I've seen things like that before. To answer your question, yes, if there was something that was being designed new and not just a replacement of something that was there on any new project, yes, it would be very clear from point A to point B, the slope and the outlet and how it was going to be conveyed and all that stuff. But because this was a replacement, it very well may have happened the way I said. I don't know, and I don't know. I mean, I could research this to death, and I don't know if I can ever figure that out. Possibly. I just don't know.
Wouldn't somebody with the county had to sign off on the design and/or the construction, and probably both?
Yeah, but that's what I'm just saying, Todd. If they showed that they were reducing the flow and the area coming to the culvert, and so the subdivision itself made things better, okay, than it was before. I realize you may still have a problem, but if they showed that they're reducing the area and the amount of water coming to it, then that's all. Each subdivision is not charged to solve all the world's problems. You see what I'm saying? So they could have shown that they reduced the amount of area coming, the amount of water coming, so on and so forth, and yes, that would have been reviewed, and yes, it would have more than likely been approved, no different than as it is now. But like I said, that's purely, making an intelligent assumption on my part. I don't know exactly. I mean, I could go through and look through the file and all that stuff, but.
I haven't heard a conclusion yet from the board, but it seems like people are implying at this point that this is how it was installed. I have no reason to doubt your word. You say you didn't add any backfill, so I can only conclude that there's a drain, and right at the exit of the drain, there's 15 inches of earth. I'm not a drainage expert, but it's hard to imagine that somebody would have installed it and said, yep, that's going to work.
I have a question. When they install something like that, is there like a final inspection? Does somebody go inspect their work to make sure that it meets what they said that they was going to do?
They're required to file as-built plans, absolutely.
But does anybody actually physically go look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. But when you get, when the Tippecanoe County Stormwater Ordinance requires as-built elevations to be taken on the inverts of all the structures. And so, yes, that would have been provided to the office at that time. It would have been reviewed, so on and so forth. We're going down this rabbit hole of all the things that's happened historically, and I'm happy to continue down that path if we'd want to. But my elevations, the data that we took today, and I don't know what's happened over the last however many decades. What I do know is that according to the elevations at hand, the as-built, there's a tenth of a foot of fall through the existing structure, and there appears to be roughly a 1 foot obstruction in front of it. I realize that it may not go very far, but that's the information at hand. I don't, like I said, without going in and digging through everything, I can't speak to what's happened over the last 25, 30 years. So.
Right.
So even if we did find that there's an obstruction, I'm not even sure how we can tell him what to remove.
True.
Well, it sounds like the obstruction that Mr. Gellenbeck put in has been removed.
Correct.
But I am convinced that that won't solve, that that's not enough to solve the problem.
So when you put those stone in, you dug the earth out, put the stone in and put the earth back?
See, all I did was go in and just kind of squared up on the edge, and there's probably 5 or 6 layers of those stones in there, is what was in there. And then I just built it up to the top, and that's all I did. Matter of fact, my stones were probably 1.5 inches lower than the ground. So the ground was actually a little higher than my stones even. And that was just a safety concern. I didn't want it to cave in on me.
It seems like somewhere we should have information on what that was supposed to.
I can go and dig out the project file for Creekside and look at the drainage calculations and the study and all that. I'm happy to do that. I did not go that far for this particular meeting. If we want to table this meeting and do that, I'm happy to do that on behalf of the board. That should shed some light on the historical perspective of it. But I can't imagine that we're not going to find that they satisfied the ordinance at the time and so on and so forth and went through the procedure. But
Would we have in that file photos of this?
I doubt it, and that was one of the things that I was thinking about earlier. The reason I say I doubt it is because if we do, it would have been solely voluntary at the time, because that requirement that's in the ordinance now did not come about until I think 2005. Is when we actually started requiring the downstream conveyance channels to be photographed and provided to the surveyor's office. So my guess is we don't have it, but I'm happy to look at that. I guess what I was trying to say is that I'm happy to go and dig all that stuff out. It may shed some light on exactly what happens, but I think we're going to make a complete circle and end up right back where we are. There's no good solution to the situation. Short of doing a major road improvement, putting a storm sewer in, like Stu said, within the county road right of way, that would certainly solve the problem, but obviously that comes with a dollar tag. Short of the landowners working together and putting a tile through there to take care of the problem, which, you know, is I'm sure a much cheaper option. Mr. Gillenback said he didn't feel it was his responsibility to brunt the total cost. I don't dispute that or argue with him about that. That's a legitimate concern. I guess my question to Todd and to Bill and maybe anybody else that's affected there, have you tried to reach out to your neighbors and have you discussed, you know, pulling financial resources and trying to work together as neighbors and put something in there to resolve it? Well, I don't remember if there's exactly, let me see if I can measure it real quick. No, that's not the same, it's not the measure tool. It's a few hundred feet. I was thinking about 600, 500 to 600 roughly when I was looking at this before, or maybe a little shorter. You know, I guess, has that been discussed? Has there been a discussion as far as doing it privately and pooling resources to try and accomplish that?
I don't know what discussions you've had. I've discussed one-to-one on a couple of occasions, the options of cutting a swale across there and burying a tile, which that's what led us here was, you know, Bill, and understandably was not interested in absorbing cost on this. Neither am I, frankly. I guess the only other comment that I would make on this is I made this petition in good faith, thinking that I knew for a fact he'd add the landscape blocks. He's not denying that, but my assumption is that whoever designed it and constructed it as a drain was provisioning for the water to move on from that point, not run into a 14-inch wall at the exit of the drain. So logically, I was taking that as the premise that there must have been a natural water course for the water to progress on. Sounds like the conclusion is Bill didn't add anything. So then I can only conclude that it either wasn't properly designed or constructed, and so I don't know why it would be on either of us to have to correct an issue that was approved by the county. So I don't really accept the notion that we should have to look for options to pool funds to fix an issue that was never properly done to begin with, if that's the premise that we're concluding here, that there was no water course to begin with. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. It doesn't seem like a fair answer to me.
I guess I'll play devil's advocate. Rules change, people change, things happen. I mean, you know, unfortunately.
Path that the thing was put in on. So if we bring it into a storm, we're changing the drainage way, we're rerouting it, which I think brings a little bit of a question. And then the costs would definitely be, rather than building 1,000 feet, say, of storm, to do 600 feet of swale and keep it where it was originally,
So
the
there's,
drainage way.
no, I'm sorry, Stu, not to interrupt you, but just to clarify the distances real quick, there's roughly the 1,000 feet,
1,000
which I think
feet.
is what you just said.
Yeah.
And then if we squirrel around in here somewhere, there was 5.5, I said 600, so maybe.
Yeah.
Depending upon where it would daylight this direction, you're looking probably anywhere from almost 400 to, I don't know,
If you look at the house to
500,
the west,
550. Yeah, here.
right there,
Mhm.
once you get past that house, that grade drops drastically. That's all swamp down in
I
there.
gotta get across that next drive though.
Yeah, you're well, if you go back to the east, once you got out into that, yeah, like right in there, once you got past that, you're down into it's probably it's flood, because I've seen water in there.
But I don't think there's a defined drainage way at that point. I think you gotta come further, more into the 800 or 1,000 feet. I mean, I'm just going by memory. It was a pretty long pipe. And it's not the natural drainage way. It's gonna cost, it just seems to make more sense to have the water go where it's supposed to go, not where it's supposed to go, where it
Naturally would.
naturally goes.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue this to?
Yeah, so if you, as Tom was going, if you want to recess it to another meeting, you can do that to get more information. So that's one thing. You've mixed a couple of concepts here. One is the petition that's in front of you that you're considering. Then you have stuff about the old drainage plans and whether they complied, and that'll inform you, and maybe as a practical matter, that's what you want to look at. But for this obstruction hearing, you're going to want to be looking at whether there's a channel. So, at the culvert, obviously you've got a channel there, and it seems to have a direction of flow because you've got a slope. Question is, at the point of obstruction, is it still a channel, or has it become sheet flow at that point? And then you're looking at the obstruction. Is it, it sounds like what you know was intentional has been removed. There's still something behind that. Was that an obstruction? Again, is it obstructing a channel, what's left, or is it just not a channel? And then the next question would be whether what's left was put there intentionally. You'd have to consider that. And then beyond that, is removing the obstruction going to do any good? So for this petition, those are all things that you have to find affirmatively to grant the petition. And then off the subject of the culvert, or of this petition, you'll be wanting to be looking at, did the design, if the design wasn't followed as approved, did that failure in design actually hurt anything? Because I think what Zach was getting at before was that you had this old culvert from who knows when in a swampy area, and it might have been that the construction approval was just on the premise, not that it was going to make things perfect or even entirely solve the problems, but that it was going to make things better. So anyway, I kind of wandered around there, but you can, if you'd like, you can recess it to whatever time and date you want.
Comments?
Well, I think the obstruction's gone, so we know the brick that we're talking about.
Correct.
So we know that part's gone. We have to take your word, you didn't bring in dirt, you basically just dug it out and stuck the bricks in, is what I'm going to guess and say to stabilize it. So removing it, will it work? Well, it's not working. I think we can say that because it's been removed and it's not working. So I guess I would like us to bring this up next month or whatever, and at least potentially get some more information. I think it's a lot easier.
So is it a recess, or?
Yeah, it'd be recessed. Since you have this hearing specifically for this purpose, I think you'd be recessing the hearing until whatever date.
Okay, so that wouldn't necessarily take a motion.
It would.
It would take a motion, okay.
Mr. President, I would move that we enter into recess until we can take this matter up again at our next meeting in October.
Yeah, the date.
What date is that?
October 7th.
That would be on October 7th.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
And that's at say 10 a.m. following your normal meeting.
Immediately following our normal drainage board meeting. So any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Move
Thank
to
you for your
adjourn- or
time.
no, move to recess. We're in recess. Sorry, never mind.
Yep, you're in recess.
We're in recess.
Yep,
I get the monkey bars.
if you don't adjourn it.
Hey, Barry, can we keep these?
Yeah, you're gonna wanna put those in whatever petition file you've got. It's evidence, man.
Going by the road, you're saying it's almost 600 feet exactly.
I hear you. That's all, there's always gonna be water in that. It's gonna have to evaporate.
Your old scoop truck, you could